So consistency, obviously a very important thing. I always feel like sometimes I'm thinking about people who are listening that maybe they realize like, wow, I have been all over the map, totally haven't been consistent. Is this the kind of thing that you just come in one day and you're like, I heard a podcast and we're not messing around anymore? Or do you maybe need to ease into but then easing into consistency doesn't sound very consistent. So what do you do if you're just like at a place where your child doesn't believe anything you say because you've been so inconsistent about punishment? Welcome to the Empowering Choices podcast. My name is Joshua.
I am Lucas.
And I'm Erik.
Erik and Lucas are licensed professional counselors, and the title of today's episode is Some Rules Are for Everyone.
Now, Erik, you immediately started talking before we were recording of like, well, but maybe not. So where were you headed with that?
Well, no, I just said it depends on which way you go with that. Because
it depends. Should be our
depends.
Should that be our tagline? Empowering choices, counseling, and parenting. It depends.
Well, if you take your two different parenting styles, the authoritative and the authoritarian,
okay,
you're going to have two different takes on that one title right there.
Okay.
And so if you're going to take it to a rigid place, some rules are for everyone.
Well, the rigid place would be all rules are for everyone, right?
Oh, well, yes, they would be all rules are for everyone. Yes, all the time. That's it. Or if you're going to go the other way and,
permissive, that's the third parenting style that I can never remember.
Yeah, well, I wasn't going with that one.
No, I know. I would just...
If you're using that title and you're going the other, what would it be, the authoritarian?
Oh, lots of rules? Dictatorial?
Not dictatorial, the other one. I always get these two.
I know. They're terrible titles.
Yeah, they are.
The whatever one is nicely balanced.
Right. Yeah, and so then say all rules are for everyone.
All or some?
Oh, well, we can go some this time.
Okay. No. I'm just checking.
Well, but even if you went all with that parenting style, then there's going to be a flexibility in the relationship as to what that means.
Right.
What we're really trying to talk about is consistency, and what parents in that information that I found were saying is that they regretted not being more consistent.
Yes, that's true, I suppose. Like, I just really liked the phrase that you had put in the notes of some rules are for everyone, but you're right. The greater title was about consistency.
Right.
Because if you consistently have a rule whereby if the entire family is in chaos and everyone's having a bad day, and you consistently relax the rules in that situation, you're being consistent about one of your exceptions. You have a consistent exception, maybe?
Possibly.
So the bit about the rules does have a more kind of a rigid interpretation to it.
I was a proctor parent at one point, and that's like a foster parent, but it's a higher level of care.
And was it always for like DD, developmentally disabled folks?
It had all the kids that were in there had to have disabilities of some sort.
That was my understanding of the definition.
Right. And so one of the kids that we had, he had gotten grounded for a couple of weeks, basically. And his case manager just happened to come through town, just happened to be coming through town at 10 o'clock at night. And the child was from like hundreds of miles away. And she said, I just wanted to talk about, this grounding thing that had happened. I understand, and we'll call him Billy, that, Billy just, running away in the middle of the night, and, how things are set up to where he's, kind of lost privileges. I mean, we have an agency that was over us, and all of this was put together through the agency and signed off by her.
The grounding.
Yes, this whole grounding thing. And she stood there in my kitchen and said, with my own kids, they do something wrong. I ground them for a couple of weeks. And then, a couple of days later, I feel like giving them a new try. And she's like, I really think we should give him a new try. Now, she wasn't going through the agency, mind you. She was coming to my house, wanting me to be the one to go to the agency. So the consistency here all over the place is just ridiculous.
Sure.
But that's the thing is that, okay, he's grounded, and the consistency says you've got to stick with that, because if you don't stick with what it is that you've said that you're going to do, then you're going to lose any credibility for any authority in that child's life. Now, can things be also in that child's life between you and that child? Yes. I still did things with Billy during that time. His thing was he couldn't go out and go do things out in the community.
Okay.
That's kind of his grounding.
You didn't have to make him miserable at home on top of it.
No, and I think he didn't have his electronics, but we still did things together during that time. There were games that happened,
Well, that's just like the thing that like we're talking about. Like all of these things are tools, and the best outcomes come when you're combining these things.
Right.
You have to know your kid. You have to spend time with your kid. Because if you're only and simply consistent, but you don't spend time with your kid and you don't know your kid and you're only applying these rules, I don't know, from a distance maybe would be, I mean, yeah.
Well,
You're not gonna have a great outcome.
well, let's just say that Billy, being grounded, he's not doing well. I mean, you can just see that emotionally, one way I might put it is it looks like his spirit is on the line. He could in some way break. I'm going to come in there, and yes, he's still grounded. I'm not going to remove that grounding, but I'm going to interact with him. I'm going to interact with him in a relational way. I was actually just talking to one of our counselors here before we came over here, and they have a parent who it looks like is struggling to understand that even though your child is grounded, you can still go and color with them. You could play games with them. You could talk with them. Could,
It's
could
not a
have
solitary confinement.
Right.
Yeah, solitary confinement when you're growing up creates a lot of problems when you're grown up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we solitary confinement for a child, we call that timeout, and we put limits on it in the matter of minutes, not weeks.
And I've worked with parents who they would, their preferred, grounding style went like this. You're grounded until further notice. Now, have I been in a situation like that? Well, I've done crimes when I was a teenager or child that could have warranted anyone hearing that going, yeah, your parents were well justified to ground you forever. My parents always put limits on it. A 30-day grounding to my room, school being my privilege and only privilege, all meals eaten in my room, one restroom break in the morning, one in the afternoon, one in the evening.
That does sound like it's approaching solitary confinement.
And it was fitting, but it had a time limit.
Oh, it wasn't for the next forever. Yeah.
Yes. Now, and I'll tell you why that, because I have the strongest will of anyone I've ever known. Okay. That's what my parents got to deal with. So on the last couple of days of that grounding, he's already seen it before. Yeah. My dad would bring me out and he said, hey, you're doing really good. Why don't you come out and help me do some chores?
All right, let's loosen up a hair.
Yeah, let's just, kind of get things going back again. And so on the last day of grounding, I'm outside. He's chopping the kindling. I'm picking the kindling up, and I get a little twinge of arrogance. And I thought, I could do this. I need to let him know he didn't win.
I need to let him know he didn't win.
I'm like 9, 8, somewhere in here. And so I said, Dad, this whole grounding thing. And he said, yeah, I probably could have done 60 days easy.
Just standing on my head. No big deal.
That probably wouldn't have affected me. And he goes, okay, you can have another 30. I still remember all the emotions impacted me, not him. I dropped that kindling and bawled all the way to my room. Was the right thing to do.
Well, then you said he followed through on it.
It did.
He wasn't just like
he
wasn't just like threatening you with it. He just plain old did it.
Yeah. And so I had another 30 days that was in there. Now, my parents still talk to me. They would come check on me. I've worked with parents that basically their kid is grounded until their attitude changes, until their grades change. I've worked with these families of these teenagers at different times, and it's like, okay, you want the grades to change, but in today's society, it needs internet.
Right. If you're grounding him from
Yeah.
literally everything.
Right.
Well, I mean, they were grounding him from the tools he needed to raise his grades.
Exactly.
I mean, that was literally. Yeah.
And they said, well, he then plays games. Okay, I get that, but you're also making it so he can't stay after school and get any help there either. You know, and so this is an impossible situation. And if you put a human child in an impossible situation, at some point they quit. You know, and that's the thing, is that when your consistency is crushing, then it's not consistency anymore. It's just crushing.
Yeah, I was going to say, it could accurately be called consistency, but it's also bad.
Yes. It's not a good thing to do, you know, so you've got to have a mix in there. And like, I worked with that family, and they said, well, what are we supposed to do if he's not willing to do his chores and his attitude is all bad? Well, what did you ground him for? You grounded him to get his grades up, give him the tools that he needs to get his grades up. Now it's all in his hands. He's grounded until he gets them up to a certain level, which he got them up to a certain level. Then you hand him back his privileges. And what you can say is, now you're losing those privileges because of your attitude in not getting your chores done. Here's the time that you have in that grounding. And you just make it a very black and white piece.
Yeah. I feel like kids, they don't necessarily listen to what we say. They listen to what we do. I mean, I think
110%.
about teachers that I had, that some of them, you know, if you got 2 check marks by your name, or, you know, you were going to go to the office. I don't know if they, but, you know, when put the name.
I understand the theory.
So-
yeah, like your name's going to get written on the
Right.
board, and then it's just a way of keeping track of who's in trouble.
I mean, some teachers, I probably got up to like 6 or 7 or 10 check marks, and they never sent me to the office. Now, there were a few that did not screw around, and I knew who those were. And because I saw
They were
that they were
consistent?
very consistent. And so with those, I'm not going to say a peep, because I literally know first time out of line, boom. But the others, it's almost like a game to see how far can I push this? How far can this go? And
I got 10 check marks today. Check it out, guys.
right. And we talk about that, like, you know, kids kind of come into the world to test the boundaries. And so I think that it's one of those things where we may think, oh, we're doing some kind of great thing by, you know, we'll extend more grace, well, we'll go whatever. But then you're actually showing that kid, like, hey, yeah, don't believe what I say, because you can keep pushing me.
Right.
So
The boy that the case manager wanted his privileges restored to him, that's exactly the message that she was giving. He eventually got in a very bad car wreck, him on a bike that he had stolen. You know?
oh, wow.
And it was in a different place. You know, it's I like what you said about the teachers that you knew they meant business, and the teachers that didn't, you know, because that's a piece of that consistency. If you're going to say it, then be ready to back it up.
No matter what it is.
Kids come into, because you made the statement, they come into this world to test boundaries. It's because a part of being boundaries is how they register that they're loved. So they are going to test those boundaries to see if you care enough as a parent or a person to have them in there. It's a direct subconscious reflection, you know, and so being able to understand that they're not just there to just push whatever they can push. You know, Mrs. Fuller's class, my 5th grade teacher, she did checks on the board. And it was 15 minutes a check after school writing sentences. And believe me, I would count up my cost. And it's not that I never got checks. It's just, you know, some days if my dad wanted me home to do chores, I might get a few checks, just, you know, not to have that much time.
Yeah.
Or other days it's like, is this worth it? You know, it's like Bugs Bunny, you know, and he's got that pie in his hand, you know, if I doed it, I did a spanking. I doed it.
Yeah.
And that was me in my childhood a lot. You know, I'm like, if I doed it, is it worth it?
You were like literally and intentionally counting, like, I know what punishment's coming.
Right.
And am I willing to?
Right. Because I'm seeking in a way what adults, you know, can get away with.
Right.
And because I was a very strong-willed, but the secret to me was have that relationship, have that connection. And some teachers had it, and some coaches had it, and some adults had it, and others didn't want to put the time in.
Right. One time I thought I would get ahead of the curve in science class because that was how our punishments worked. If you got in trouble, you had to write this chapter summary, fill a page with it. And so I just pre-filled a couple of pages with the chapter summary with the idea that I could screw around. And then when I got in trouble, go. But the problem was I wasn't smart enough to hold that and spend the time that I would have to give it. I just wanted the coolness of like, there you go. This doesn't mean anything to me. Mm-hmm. So as soon as I got in trouble, there you go. And then they're like, do 10 more. So
sure, right. Okay. That's easy.
Yeah,
no,
if I had been smart, I would have just chilled it. But yeah.
It's awesome.
It's always interesting trying to test those boundaries, but that's totally true. And there were people who you just knew you didn't mess with. And so so yeah, but it is hard. I mean, I can tell, my son, he will understand that I'm saying don't do that, and I kind of view it like
right. What's going to happen?
Pushing the button on the fire, the smoke detector, to make sure that it's really going to go off, when there's a fire. And so push the button, and it is hard to not be like, okay, we'll just keep going that way. But yeah, so consistency. Obviously a very important thing. I always feel like sometimes I'm thinking like about people who are listening that maybe they realize like, wow, I have been all over the map, totally haven't been consistent. Is this the kind of thing that you just come in one day and you're like, I heard a podcast and we're not messing around anymore? or do you maybe need to ease into but then easing into consistency doesn't sound very consistent. So what do you do if you're just like at a place where your child doesn't believe anything you say because you've been so inconsistent about punishment?
About only punishment?
Well, I would say that, or just whatever else, I guess.
Well, I had sessions with a mom and a daughter at one point, and the daughter was very much in control of the family, and the mom would be like, we're not doing that, and the daughter's like, this is what we're doing, and the mom would be like, I guess we're doing that, and I'd be like, we're not doing that. What are we doing here? This is not going to happen. And so consistency can be across the board. In other words, because one of the weaknesses that my dad had is that he was absolutely inconsistent in his promises. Consistency is a piece in your parenting that it's across the board. If you don't mean it, don't say it. I was once promised a pony, and my mom was all over my dad because
it's a punishment or a reward.
Right? Yeah. Period. And he realized what a mistake that he had made. It was a big impact because I love horses. I always wanted a horse. It was going to be good, and it was probably going to be a unicorn. But that I had to
picturing you with a pony trying to figure out how to make a unicorn.
Yeah, it'd be much bigger than a pony. But and so that consistency is across the board. Dads, especially your daughters, need to know that you're consistent and that you mean what you say and you say what you mean. They're going to run into all kinds of people out there who are going to be dismissing them or trying to take advantage of them. And they need to know that you're going to back them. They need to know you're going to be there for them. So a part of consistency also gives you strength in your relationship with your kids, because they know they have a safe haven to come home to, and that people cannot just sway you. And I've seen it. I mean, the dads that, anywhere 30s and up, some of you are going to remember Leave It to Beaver, but the more up you get, you're going to remember Leave It to Beaver. Well, there was a guy in there named Eddie Haskell, and Eddie Haskell was a shyster. He would come in and he would try and persuade Mrs. Cleaver in any way he wanted, and she would shut him down quick, And so if you haven't seen Leave It to Beaver, and they're black and white, you probably see him on YouTube, see him, because you're going to have people coming into from your kids' worlds that are going to be like, hey, I got this. I can manipulate your parents. Your dad's not going to be anything. They need to know that you're going to be that guardian, and that's with the consistency. So to go back to your question, Josh, what do? You just start being consistent wherever you can. Now, if you intentionally want to do that, then you tell them little things. I used to do this in treatment centers. They would come in, kids would come in, and they would need toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant. There was a list. And so they're like, well, I don't have certain stuff. I'm like, okay. And I pull out a piece of paper, and they'd tell me what they needed, and then I would go get it before that day was done. Because I wanted them to see that adults were going to follow through with the needs that they have. So pick easy things that you can then be able to automatically, even if the stuff's just down in the closet and you know it and they don't know it, but that's a part of that consistency that's coming in there.
It's almost like trustworthy.
Yep.
Is like, I'm trying to figure out because
Yep.
you're talking about something that sounds slightly different than consistency, but yeah, there's like a trustworthiness that I think goes along in there as well.
I think they go a lot together, but in order to be trustworthy, you have to be consistent.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You couldn't be one without the other, I don't think.
Right. And so if you're going to say, listen, TV goes off at 8:00, then the TV goes off at 8:00. If your kid's not going to give you the remote, you don't have to fight for it. The TV has a plug-in.
Or a circuit breaker in the garage.
Or a circuit breaker. Yeah, you just have to know what things you need to do and what things you can do.
Right.
In the beginning, if you have had very little to no consistency, they're going to fight to keep that power.
Yeah.
So put your seatbelt on and lovingly be consistent, and eventually they will come around.
Yeah, I saw a picture. This was on like Instagram or something, but it was basically a sign that mom had left out for the kids, probably during like summer when they're sleeping in. And it was basically, once you've done your chores, take a picture of this sign, put a box of whatever next to it, so I know that it's a current picture, and then that will unlock today's Wi-Fi password. So I just thought, yep, you got a system there, and probably does that every.
That's pretty funny.
That's a great.
Take a picture
system.
with today's newspaper.
Chores, yep, take the picture, send it, and you'll get the Wi-Fi password.
We forget that human beings do naughty things.
Yeah.
Human beings are prone to doing naughty things. Human beings are prone to taking the easy road.
Right.
If mom and dad isn't there, yeah, I got all those dishes done.
Yep.
Yeah, I took out the garbage. And then they come home. Oh, yeah, I guess I didn't. I did one. And you have to have ways that are going to be able to back that up and help them understand that, no, this is not a negotiable piece in some of these different things. Need you to take care of this.
Yeah.
When you were talking, Josh, about kind of like the adults who were consistent or not,
right?
And I don't think we exactly touched on this. Yeah, I think we did. But it's kind of like, you were saying, the thing you were saying is it's not what they say, it's what they do.
Right.
And then so like if you as an adult in habits that you have in your own life that children see, if you're inconsistently acting about just your own stuff, if you tell them to brush their teeth and then you don't,
right.
They're gonna they're gonna learn more from what they see than what they hear.
Yeah.
Scientifically, those are mirror neurons located in the frontal lobe of the brain, and they influence a lot. And that's, do as I say, not as I do is kind of, the old adage. And kids are, I remember being the kid that's like, okay, this is what I'm being told. This is what I'm seeing. Yeah, no, it's not going to happen.
And if they don't match.
Yeah, they don't match, it's not going to happen. And it's one of those things that you have to realize that will weigh against you in the whole part of parenting and being able to take care of your kids.
Maybe that's what you would tell, or you could talk to a parent who's like, I've been inconsistent. How do I start?
Yeah.
It's like, well, maybe start in your own life. Right.
Yeah.
Or, and that has to go along with all of it. But it's like, well, how do I start? Well, maybe start there.
Yeah.
You could. I mean, that's one place.
Absolutely. Yeah. So many options, but it's just.
Yeah. But if at the same time, so the formula would be, as it is with a lot of things, take a look at the relationship and then take a look at what you might need to do consistently, whether it's in your own life or in your kid's life first, but just take a look at what's going on. If you've been inconsistent, there should be plenty of places that you could start saying, this needs to change. And then, if you want your kids to pick up their clothes and put it in the right place and you don't, then that's a part of looking at, okay, what can help stimulate this? And I've seen parents do that. And, it can work very well. Please understand, in the West, we want it to have happened yesterday or the day before we think of starting it. And this is going to take time because these are habits that have been made. It takes 4 to 6 weeks to make a habit, 6 to 8 weeks to break a habit. You're doing both simultaneously. So it's going to take a little bit of time because you're also doing it with those who are resistive to possibly wanting any change because they like how it's been going, even if they don't know it would be better to have it change.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, I'm kind of wanting to just be inconsistent and not do a regular outro here to see if it throws anyone off.
Just Eric. It'll just throw Eric
Now
off.
that you've said that, you mean?
Yeah. So,
Oh.
all right. We'll see you guys later. Just kidding. It's hard for me not to be consistent. So.
You couldn't even do it. You couldn't even follow through.
I couldn't do it. So, but yeah. So if you enjoyed this podcast, we'd really appreciate it if you would give us a thumbs up or a positive or whatever on wherever you're watching it. Give us a review. Let us kind of know how it resonated with you. And then definitely check out our app. You can go to the App Store, search Empowering Choices Parenting, and go to our website, empoweringchoices.community, where you can find more information, courses, and podcasts just like this one. We'll see you on the next episode.
I think I'm rubbing off on you, Josh. You're trying to come up with like a classy outro
True.
or some kind of snarky. Yeah. Anyway.